Whenever Nintendo partners with another developer, it usually turns out great. When they teamed up with Silicon Knights, we got Eternal Darkness. When they took on Retro Studios, we got Metroid Prime. And when they got together with Square Enix, we got Super Mario RPG. As long as we ignore Metroid Other M, Nintendo has a great record when it comes to publishing, and now it seems like it's Platinum Games' turn. Platinum Games was formed back in 2006 by employees from Capcom, or more specifically Clover Studios. Over this last generation, Platinum Games has become the developer to keep an eye on, thanks to games such as Mad World, Bayonetta, and Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Most of their games were published by Sega, but Sega has decided to drop the company, which has led Nintendo to agree to publish their next two games, Bayonetta 2 and The Wonderful 101 as Wii U exclusives. The Wonderful 101 is a new IP that was revealed back at E3 2012, and has been one of the main Wii U exclusives that people have kept an eye on. So, now that it's finally out, in Europe and Japan anyway, how did it turn out? Is it another winner for Platinum Games, or were both the Nintendo and the Wii U a bad fit for them? Let's have a look. The Wonderful 101 takes place on an alternative, slightly futuristic version of Earth. An army of aliens called Gethjerth are trying to invade Earth for the third time. You play as the Wonderful 100, who are a group of heroes tasked with protecting Earth and defeating the aliens. The style of the game is inspired by tokusatsu, which means that everything is flashy and over the top. There are some really great moments that you would expect to see only in a Platinum game. There is also quite a lot of dialogue from the different members of the Wonderful 100, but it matches the style of being over dramatic and contains some good jokes. I like that most of the members are simply stereotypes and that they didn't let political correctness get in the way of making some good light-hearted jokes. I do have some problems with the story though. At the beginning I had a really hard time getting sucked into it, as it does a bad job of setting it up. You start off as playing as Wonderful Red, aliens show up, and then you're just fighting aliens for most of the game. There's more story to it than that, but that doesn't come until later, so it takes a while to become invested into it. The other problem I have is with one character called Luca. Luca is a random kid who hates the Wonderful 100 and is always getting himself involved. This character is annoying, has no redeeming qualities, and is completely pointless. There is a payoff about why Luca does the things he does, but I still hate him, especially because all the other characters spend a lot of time looking out for him or having to save him. Still, the story is good thanks to the game's style and all the other characters being likeable. The gameplay comes down to controlling a large group of heroes from an isometric perspective. Some people have compared this game to Pikmin, as you play as a leader who commands the other heroes, but it plays completely different to that game. The core gameplay is split in between platforming and puzzle solving and fighting enemies, but you need to use the Unite morphs for both. Unite morphs are the ability that the Wonderful 100 have that are made out of the heroes in your party. For example, Wonderful Red can transform the members into your group into a giant fist, and you can also make ladders out of them to climb buildings. Throughout levels you'll also find other people who you can make join your party, and with more members your attacks become larger and more powerful. The Unite morphs are activated by using the gamepad's touchscreen. When you slide your finger over the screen, your group of heroes will replicate your finger's movement. So, if you encounter a gap that you need to cross, you have to slide your finger across the screen to make your heroes cross the gap, and then they will then make a bridge. If we ignore the combat for a second, the Unite morphs are a really cool idea and help separate this game's platform sections from other platformers. There are also hidden collectibles that you need to find with the Unite morphs, so if you see a suspicious spot on the ground, you need to draw a line and then a circle to equip the hammer morph and then hit the ground for an item. Progressing through levels involves switching to the right Unite morphs at the right time, and drawing on the touchscreen is simple enough to make it fun doing so. The game's combat has a lot to it, so let me explain the controls first. You push B to jump and the Y button to run. The X button uses your team attack, which is your most basic attack that only deals minimal damage, but the members of your team will climb over the enemy you're attacking and can potentially lock them into place. The A button uses whatever Unite morph you had equipped at one time as an attack. To change your main Unite morph you have to draw it on the screen and then press A to confirm it and equip it. However, you can make your team use another Unite morph by drawing the Unite morph on the screen and hitting X instead. It means that while you're attacking an enemy with the Sword Unite morph, you could potentially draw a gun Unite morph and then have your team shoot at enemies without you directly controlling them. It means that while the game doesn't have any specific button combos, you can create your own combos by using certain Unite morphs together. It ultimately means that the combat has a lot of depth to it without being daunting, as someone could be using 5 different Unite morphs at one time, and someone could also be using one Unite morph, and both would be in their comfort zone and enjoying the game. It is a bit tricky at first getting used to drawing the morphs, but it doesn't take too long to get used to it, and once you do, it works really well. You can also use the right analog stick to draw morphs if you're not a fan of the touchscreen, which I rarely found myself doing, but it's still a nice alternative. The combat isn't perfect though. When drawing the Unite morphs in the middle of a fight, sometimes the game doesn't recognise which shape you're drawing. This is a minor problem though, as for the majority of the time the game picks up whatever you're trying to draw, even if you do it a bit rushed. It also isn't a problem because while one Unite morph might not pick up correctly, you have to draw so many different ones that having one particular not work rarely messes you up. This is because the Unite morphs you have to draw are the ones you need to use attacks, as the two defensive morphs you have, which are a block and a dodge, are used by pressing the two back Z buttons. An actual problem that the combat has though is the cheapness of certain enemies. While I admit I am not that good at the game, some attacks just feel cheap when they hit you. The best example I can give is that there are these tanks that have protective armor on, and they usually show up in pairs. Unfortunately, when you attack one of them, the other one will normally go off camera and will shoot at you, but you can't tell that you're being shot at. Once again, I'm not an expert at playing this game, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who won't have these problems, but the average gamer probably will. When I did feel like I got hit cheaply, it mostly came from the fact that the game can get very chaotic during fights. I would say overall though that how chaotic and messy the fights become is a good thing, as it's cool to see and makes the fight fun to be a part of. There are a lot of over-the-top cutscenes, and the majority of them feature quick-time events. You will either have to jump onto new platforms or have to draw a certain Unite morph. I'm not the biggest fan of quick-time events, but in the Wonderful 101 they just work. They feel very well done, and thanks to the style of the cutscenes it actually felt good to have some interactivity with them. It's also very satisfying dealing final blows to the bosses with the Unite morph in a quick-time event. Speaking of bosses, this game, like Platinum's other titles, has great boss battles. They aren't the most craziest or creative that has ever come out of Platinum, but it's fun to be a part of the spectacle which is taking down the bosses. The bosses also have a large range to them, as some of them just involve fighting them one-on-one, or you could be chasing them down in a spaceship, or you could even be having a boxing match in a Punch-Out!-esque fight. This game also has really great visuals, as it's impressive how well it runs with everything that goes on at one time. It has a very cartoony look to it, to the point where the characters look more like toys than real people, but overall it works. Let's talk about the game's difficulty. As already mentioned, the game can be a bit tricky to get used to and figure out at first, which isn't really a bad thing as it's simply the price you pay for having unique gameplay. When you start a new game you only have 3 difficulties: very easy, easy and normal. I chose to play this game on easy as it was the middle option, and for me that was just right. It stopped the game from becoming frustrating, but the game still felt like a challenge. Beating the game on easy didn't unlock the harder difficulties for me, but they do exist. It's a case of picking the right difficulty for you, and this is helped by the fact that you can change the difficulty in between story missions. Something I found a bit strange though is just how generous the game was when it came to checkpoints. When you completely die and lose all your health, you normally continue at the exact same place where you died. This is most apparent during boss fights, as when you die and respawn, you get all your health back, but the boss doesn't. The game still felt challenging though, and I liked how smooth it made the whole experience. For those who want a real challenge though, don't worry, as the harder difficulties limit your respawns and aren't as generous with checkpoints. According to the game, the story mode took me just over 11 hours to beat, although that time seems a little low, as I believe it was closer to 15 hours. There is also a mission mode which supports 5-player co-op, but unfortunately I wasn't able to properly try it out. The Wonderful 101 is a very unique take on the action genre. Thanks to the Wii U's gamepad, there is no game that plays quite like it. What makes it great is the amount of depth that the combat has, but it's still accessible for everyone, as long as you don't mind taking a bit of time to learn the basics. The graphics and style are also great, and while it isn't the craziest Platinum game, it still stands out among most games. It isn't perfect due to a couple of problems with the combat, but I still had a good time playing through it. I doubt people will be rushing out to buy Wii U's to play the Wonderful 101, but if you've finished with Pikmin 3 then it's worth checking out. My score is 8.0 out of 10. It's a solid action game that manages to integrate the Wii U's gamepad without compromising the gameplay.